Exercise 11. So, viewing log analytics data and setting up an alert. So, as part of this exercise, we're getting exposure to both log analytics and Azure Monitor alerts, which are two very common services that are used in Azure. Really anything that you do, you're going to be logging VM logs or application logs or request logs over to log analytics. And then Azure Monitor is used to set up alerts around that data. In a log analytics workspace, you can query the data. So what we'll do is just give a quick overview of some of that capability. So if you recall before, we had a log analytics workspace open in our browser. So let's go back. So here we have log analytics. So here's our log analytics workspace. And we want to look under logs. And then we can close the queries window that pops up. So here on the left we have logs. Let's click that. We can close this queries window. And you'll notice when I've opened to this pane, now that it's been a couple minutes, we do see this table here, average temperature underscore CL. And we can double click this to get it onto our surface, highlight this and click run. And it'll actually run a query against the table for us. You notice with Kusto query language, Kusto, we don't need to do select star from table. Just the table name is good enough. And you can see in this case, thus far, we've seen one record show up in our log analytics workspace. If you give it a couple minutes, we'll see a couple more show up that were from those two other successful runs that I saw in my example. And there you go. So you can see there are two more here. So now that we know that logs are flowing there, if you don't see yours yet, give it a couple more minutes. Wait till you see those logs. And then continue on to the next section. So 11.2, creating an Azure Monitor alert. So you'll notice when you're on the log analytics workspace and you're running a query that you actually do have a button here for a new alert role right here on the canvas. So let's take a look at that. So we'll click on a new alert role. Now we're presented with creating an alert role. So our query, we're going to keep this one very simple and we're just doing average temperature. But you could add a where clause here. You could say where the temperature is greater than 21.1 degrees or something along those lines. So the purposes of our lab, we'll just follow the steps here. So we'll go to the condition tab and we'll enter our measure as table rows. Our aggregation type is count, granularity is 5 minutes, operator and greater than, threshold value of 2, frequency evaluation 5 minutes. So let's take a look at that. So we said our measure is going to be table rows, our aggregation type is going to be count, our aggregation granularity will be 5 minutes. We can leave the resource ID column on don't split. We'll leave dimensions empty. We will leave operator greater than. We'll set our threshold to 2. So what these settings are going to do is if over the course of 5 minutes, so in a rolling 5-minute window, if we have more than 2 records that show up in our average temperature table, then we're going to trigger an alert. And we're going to leave our frequency of evaluation at 5 minutes as well. So that means it'll check for this alert or this occurrence every 5 minutes. You can see it gives us average monthly cost here as well. You can set some advanced options, which we won't be using today. And then at the bottom, you'll notice that it also gives you a graph here. Next, we'll move over to actions. We're not going to take any actions in this case. We'll go to details where we have some information that's needed. We'll change our alert type from informational to warning. We'll give an alert role name. So best practice, let's use a prefix for alert dash, and we'll give it a name of average temperature. So as I've run this lab exercise, I do have one of these alerts that exists. So I'm going to give it a unique name. You can see I'm in fact still in north central US, the location for my lab. I do want to enable this upon creation, and there are some other options here for automatically resolving alerts and such. We're going to leave those default, just leave it enabled. Click review and create. And then once more, review your information, make sure it is accurate. You can see here number of violations 1, and then click create. Now we'll open up another browser tab where we will again open the Azure portal. And you can see this is a common technique when working in Azure, that you may end up with many browser tabs for various resources that you're working with to ease having to search back and forth between resources. So this time we're going to look for Azure Monitor. So you can see here right on your dashboard you do have Monitor, but you can also search for Monitor as well. Either way works. So I'm going to select Monitor. That'll take me to Azure Monitor. You can see that it lands me on the overview page where there's some links to other resources, Application Insights, which uses Log Analytics Workspace as its backing store, and some other things such as metrics and alerts. So we're going to go ahead and click on Alerts and review what's going on here. Now, what we're going to do is allow some time to pass. Every now and then we'll click the refresh button and see how long it takes an alert to trigger. Remember, since we set the frequency to 5 minutes, it could take a bit of time for this to happen. So let's give it some time. While we're waiting for that to process, I'm going to pop back over to the VM and take a look at Grafana, see what type of data we have flowing. So you can see for the whole past hour quite a lot of data that we've been generating, and it looks like just now as we're looking we generated this temperature of 21.3. So it looks like we're trending above an average of 21 degrees. So we may be triggering that alert soon. Let's change this to 3 hours. So you can see that we have in fact generated quite a bit of data here. We're past the hour-and-a-half mark. So let's hop back to the portal, see what we have. Nothing yet. We'll give it a couple more minutes. As things in Azure are eventually consistent, it can sometimes take a while for things like an alert rule to kick in. It's not immediate. So you can see in this case on the graph here, configure signal logic. You can see the dashed line. So this is our threshold for where we will alert. And at one point we were above the level here for a bit, and now we are above the level again at an aggregated value of 5. So at this point it's just a matter of time before this alert triggers, and then we're able to see that on the portal. So we'll give it another minute or two. So it did take some time for our alert to show up, but as promised, we now have an alert. You can see it's in a fired state. It's user response new. As part of this lab, we won't go into a lot of the details of how you can use Azure Monitor Alerts, but this is a good example of the exposure for what you can do. Something that we didn't touch on here is after you have an alert condition set up and you have an alert rule, you can do things such as set up actions within the alert. So if we take a look at this alert rule that we just created, you can take actions. So some of the actions that you can do is send text messages, send emails, or you could even integrate to third-party services such as PagerDuty, Teams, Slack, things along those lines for sending messages for when some of your infrastructure in Azure is in an alert state. Our example here is purposely simple, but it's meant to expose the group to some of the concepts and tools that are available. Hopefully this is a good learning experience to get you excited to go to the next layer deep. So this does conclude our month 2, day 1 lab content. I thank you for all of your patience and the time that you spent with us. Thank you.